Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, it is your favorite dark sorcerer here, and tonight I want to kind of discuss curses and the different styles of them. There's been a lot of people wanting to discuss and get into curses. Most importantly, it is more about personalized natures when it comes to curses and their questions being asked. I've been keeping my distance lately from social media because I wanted to talk about this, but I didn't know exactly how to come about and kind of just do what I got to do here. So here it is. There are three types of curses. You have the jinx, okay? The jinx is basically giving somebody bad luck, okay? The hex is more or less giving somebody a lesson, okay, teaching them a lesson. And then you have the curse itself, which is to basically maim and to kill, basically to torture and to kill. Think of it more as a slow, painful death. That's what a curse is, okay? And curses are not flung for shits and giggles. They're not flung just because somebody said no to you. No, you save these for the most deserving individuals, unless you're getting paid to do this. Okay. Now I want you to get a photo here. Okay. And I'm going to come at you from two perspectives. Number one, I'm going to come at you from a biblical, as in meaning the Bible. Okay, the JCI Bible aspect of curses, okay, of bindings, okay? But at the same time, I'm also going to come at you from a pagan perspective. So here it is. In paganism, you have what is known as hand fasting, okay? And this is the image I want you to get. When two individuals come together to get married, it's one either out of mutual beneficial agreement or it's an arranged marriage. Okay. Either way, during the ceremony, a rope with a certain amount of knots, Celtic knot, for an example, is placed or draped over their hands. Okay, as they're holding hands. This symbolizes their eternal bond. Okay. But here's the kicker. When we're talking bindings, you're binding yourself to that individual, but it's not a forever thing. And you'll see what I mean by this in a little bit. So before I go on, let's go into the JCI perspective. Chapter 19, verses 1 through 10. Book of Matthew, the New Testament, talks about marriage, keeping them, basically Hebrews 13, verse 4, keeping the marriage bed holy, yada, yada, yada. Okay. Meaning one male, one female. Okay. But we all know that's a load of crock because you have lesbians, gays, bis, tris, trans, whatever out there nowadays. So, and Christians despise them all. But here's the thing. In verse 5, it says, and I quote, if you're going by the King James or the New King James, or even the Teacher's Reference Edition, it says, and I quote, a man shall leave his mother and his father and cleave unto his wife, and they shall become one flesh, meaning to have children. Okay? So right here you see two different perspectives. okay, meaning the same thing, marriage, the holy matrimony, okay? Now, this in itself is a binding. You are binding yourself to that person, but guess what? There's also an out. In the European pagan traditions, all you have to do is untie those knots. Boom, done. In Islamic lore, or Hebrewism, Judaism even, you take a shoe of your lover, the one that you want a divorce from, and you go to the elders, the council, and you just say, hey, here you go. I'm done. I want out. The mainstream JCI, you go to court and you file a divorce paper stating inconceivable consequences. Okay? Basically meaning you don't see eye to eye anymore. Okay? This is your way out. Okay? This is your way out. So a binding links all of them together. A binding is a joining. Okay? So when we think joining, let's look at this from black magic, sorcery. When you jinx somebody, you are literally utilizing ill intent upon that individual. You are wishing them bad luck, okay, in a jinx fashion. If somebody has wronged you, you use a hex and you literally bind a message or a lesson, a type of lesson onto that individual, that person. You curse that individual through baneful magic. You are binding that person to that spell, that ritual. So if you're doing a cursing jar, a grisgris bag, or a voodoo doll, you're basically binding that person to that spell. Okay? It doesn't matter if it's a jinx, a hex, or a curse. Okay? So let's look at it from a voodoo perspective. You take Haitian voodoo, the voodoo doll, the feared Creole little doll. Okay? There's a video on YouTube which I got a huge kick out of, and it's literally true. It's the intent. He took this guy took out this woman out into the like a footpath or someplace down by a pond, and he pulled out a voodoo doll. He took a lock of her hair, okay, and her wedding ring. In this case, it was kind of funny. The main thing that linked her to that doll was the ring, okay. And I want you to think about this. It was her wedding ring, okay. It was her wedding ring that he put inside that doll. Men like gods, welcome to the channel. Glad you can join us, or join me, I should say. So basically, he bind he bound her to that doll, and he began to control her. Okay, but here's the kicker: near the end, it was a lesson that he taught her. Don't believe. Do not believe that you do not have the power. Okay, and this is why. Even though he made her stand on one leg, she couldn't speak. She had to wave because he was moving the doll. He basically told her, "You thought I had cursed you, that I had control over you. You gave me your link. You gave me your will when you gave me that link to the spell through your wedding ring." Okay? He showed the binding process of how a voodoo doll works. But a grisgris bag or a cursing jar is not the same thing as a voodoo doll. If you use a grisgris bag, you have to place it where your victim is going to be, or travels or transverses. on a day in and day out venture. Okay, think of it as if you bury it out front of the main door of where your victim comes and goes. You're linking and binding that spell in that griskus bag to that victim. Now, if you do this in a trail, you risk the populace becoming infected. So therefore, you may want to think, do I give two shits about everyone else? If you do, well, then don't do it. Put it where that person's going to be by him or herself. Okay? Now, if you don't give it two shits of who it infects, by all means, place it where numerous people go, including your victim, your target. Okay? Now, as I said, not everything is the same. A cursing jar, on the other hand, you have an item of that person. Okay? You have a photo, perhaps, maybe a lock of hair or something that that person has his or her DNA upon. You place it in the jar with, say, black powder, sulfur powder, graveyard dirt, maybe some bones and some iron metallic type coins, or maybe even railroad spikes. Okay. Hello, Mother Eldridge. How you doing? So right here, you're binding that photo. That photo came from that person's Facebook account, or perhaps their YouTube account, their Instagram account, whatever. Maybe you just snap the photo of that individual. Okay. Either way, that energy, that current is right there in that photo, and you've captured it for that spell. That is the binding link. Then it's up to you on who and what method you're going to use. Okay. What demon are you going to use to torment that individual, that soul? What method are you going to use? Are you going to use, like, say, something you find on Google, like, say, I don't know. Let's One of the biggest things out there in PDF format is the Lucifer's Touch, or perhaps even the Three Nights of Hell, maybe War Water, you know, elemental cursing, even. Okay, there's a lot of them out there that just people just go with. Somebody's made it up, they put it on PDF, and they've used it. I can personally tell you that Three Nights of Hell actually works. Lucifer's Touch actually works. Why? Because I've used them. I've seen the results firsthand. But here's the kicker: you're binding this individual to a spell. So therefore, you got to figure out, do I want this person to have bad luck? Do I want to teach that individual a lesson? Or do I just simply want to remove them personally and permanently from the equation? That's what you got to come up with. And only you can discern which one of these factors you want to use. But either way, when it comes to cursing, you may want to have all your ducks in a row. Okay? You may want to consider utilizing, say, lords of death, like, say, Hel or Helios in Norse mythology, Orion, the dark god, in Zoroastrianism, perhaps even Anubis in Egyptian. Okay? Let's go with Chernobog out of Slavic tradition. Maybe even, I don't know, let's go with Alistar, the executioner, or perhaps Abaddon in more modern terms of angelology. Maybe even Azrael, the angel of death. Either way, it's your choice to choose. Who would best be suited for what spell, and go from there. Lately, I've been working with a certain spirit. This spirit has led me into a couple other spirits that I've been working with closely for the last few days, the last few weeks. It's led me into some very dark and potent magics through Arabic, proto cultures of European traditions, Middle Eastern, and yes, even Asian. Buddhism in Asian has some very potent entities that you can work with, especially in death essences. Hermetics, another one, the Da'ath, the tree of death, Da'ath energy. Working with Supe in Inca or Incan traditions, the Lord of the Dead, Hecate, goddess of the dead, justice, even, witchcraft, and the underworld. Work with Osiris, the Lord of iniquity. Personally, the two that I work with in that case is I judge the person or let the person judge themselves through Osiris. And I work with the goddess of justice and let the crime fit the spell. The spell will fit that crime. There's an old Maledictus for Thorn, which states a self-made punishment. Very, very fun little spell. Why? Because your victim punishes themselves. They pick the punishment. If they feel guilty or any kind of guilt over what they've done, Osiris will seek that out. The gold versus the feather. And Hecate, well, she'll just simply go, guilty. But remember this, keep your nose clean. Why? Because Hecate does not give two shits if you are the target or the victim. If you have any hostile intent towards that person, she'll turn the spell on you as easily as your target. Very, very true thing. I've seen it firsthand through a friend of mine who paid a very hefty price on that one. However, if you really want to get into cursing, I would recommend looking at the items that you use. In Celtic lore, in a griskus bag, they always had an engraved metal coin, a silver coin, that had certain occult runes on it. Bones charred. Some gems, even, mixed in. Very, very interesting stuff. Mix it in with graveyard dirt. If you want to bring in demons, like I said, sulfur. But a lot of these old spells, they didn't require nursery rhymes. No. These were old school casters that were quite powerful. And you can look a lot of this stuff up right online. There's a lot of books out there that have discussed such things. Well, if you're going to do that, Men of Gods, I would also recommend working with the Tower card. Not just the Hangman, okay? Or in your case, the Sun Rising Ruler. Namely because of the fact that black magic is the only one that uses curses, hexes, and bindings. White magic is always about healing. That is why you've never seen anybody that practices white light traditions cast stones of any kind. You look at the Hermetics, the Middle Eastern. Look at the Bible. How many times did their so-called savior get attacked by the Pharisees? Not once did he curse them. They even tried to get him to curse them. To turn even Job, for an example. They tried to get him to curse his God. Job 1, it was Satan that went into Jehovah's kingdom and said, hey, your people are not living right for me. It was God, their God, that sent Satan after him. Said you can do whatever you want, but you cannot kill. You cannot kill. And yet, today, Christians say that Satan is a murderer. He never killed. Job lost everything. He lost his wife, his family. His friends turned on him. Not once did he turn on his God. Okay? So, where in any white light traditions have you seen a white light practitioner curse someone, cast a punishment upon somebody? Even in Christianity, they say, well, God's going to condemn you. Even Islamic, Jewish, or Hebraic systems all say the same thing. Hermeneutics, the Kabbalah, the Quran, you name it, it's all there. Not once do you see any white light practitioner use curses, hexes, or jinxes. Only those in black magic, such as necromancy, Satanism, demonolators, dark pagans, Wiccans, the Darak in Druidism, the dark shaman, utilize curses, hexes, and jinxes, just like a Bokor in Haitian Voodoo, the Marimberos in Santeria or Palo traditions. You don't see anybody outside of the black magician being able to do this. This is why so many individuals go to a black magician to curse, to seek justice when the justice system fails. They go to us, the black magician, the black magi, the sorcerer, not the white lighters, because their job is only to heal. You go back 500 years, you go back 1,000 years. You see three types of classifications of sorcerers. The first class are those who belong to the church, the clergy. It is said that the clergy is the only one who can call upon devils and perform magic because they cannot be corrupted by them. The second classification are the white lighters who go to the church and ask for permission to perform spells. 9 times out of 10, it is for healing only, and they are sanctified by the church to do so. The church has the right to say yay or nay at that point. If they say no, guess what? You're fucked. And then you have the third classification, those who don't seek permission from the church, those who are seen as black magicians and sorcerers, such as the Hexa, the Yaji, the Yashin, the Bokor, the Strega. These are old terms for practitioners and types of witchcraft. They don't ask for permission, they just do. You go back into ancient African traditions, and you see where, depending on the the tribe and the laws of the land, where the practitioner either lives right next to the tribal king, or they live just outside the village. They're either practitioners of both white and black magic, such as the shaman, or the magi and sage, the hangan, the palero, etc. Or you can go into European traditions, where the practitioner either lives just on the outside of the village or out in the boondocks. People used to go to these practitioners and traded for their services. If they had no money, they would trade fish and furs, something of equal value to what they were seeking. Either way you look at it, it's a form of commerce, but it was a service they did, and they were penalized by the church for doing so. They were sought out, burned at the stake, drowned, hung, burned alive, imprisoned, beaten, tortured. Why? Because they didn't seek permission. Think about that for just a minute. They never sought it out. They never sought out permission. They went out and just did it, or they were hired to do so. Sandra, long time no see. Well, to be fair, Mother Eldritch, hedge witches and practitioners are recent developments. They're recent types of witches. They only go back about 30 years, 40 max. Not really, men of like gods. When you fling a curse or you bind a curse to an individual, an object, or a location, okay? Think of it like this. Practitioners of old would place a curse on a tomb. Think Egyptian, Giza, the pyramids, the tombs of the pharaohs. It prohibited people from disturbing that location, from plundering its riches. Okay, a place such as a haunting can keep a person there, a spirit, a demon, even at that one location. Think of the demon house. Think of all the possessions that you've heard of over the years. Think of the nuns of Loudun, 18th century, or say, for an example, let's go with the most famous one in London, England. I think it was Glasgow or someplace over that way that Lorraine and her husband investigated. Okay, supposedly it was Valak that was possessing a little girl. Okay, think of everything that the church has claimed was demonic possession. This was the possession of a person, a possession of a place, okay? A cursed object, all right? Just because you know the person's age is irrelevant, and just because you know the person's location is irrelevant. It does not matter the time or place. All you need is to bind that spell to that individual, and the universe will do the rest. You have to remember that it is your will, it is your intent. You are literally sending out negative energy to curse someone. It is your intent to either jinx, hex, or kill. Give somebody bad luck, teach them a lesson, or to eliminate them. It is your intent. It It has nothing to do with a date, time, or location. Just because you know the route of an individual. I mean, think of it like this. If an individual is a creature of habit, let's say, for an example, they never go past, say, 2 miles in a run of a day. That gives you a very narrow location to place your curse, especially if it's a Griscus bag or, say, an object of dark power. Okay? But if you take a photo of that individual, you put it in a cursing jar, you go to the nearest cemetery that's, say, outside of a mile from your home, you bury it in that cemetery, and you walk away. You've washed your hands of that curse. You have washed your hands of that person. And that person, as that deteriorates in the ground, is going to deteriorate in life. The same effects that cursing jar is going to be experiencing while in the ground at a cemetery, in an unmarked grave, maybe even a brand new grave. If you find a grave that has been dug up because they're planning on burying someone, and you place that jar in that grave, that hole, and they put that coffin in there or that box, they lower that box down in there, unaware that that cursing jar is down in the very bottom, probably after it's rained or while it's raining, gets covered in mud, so they don't even see it, and they just bury it all together. Guess what? You just linked that person's that perished, their death, to your victim. That's a binding in itself. You take somebody who has been died of a violent gang war. You take their blood, their soul, and you place it on your enemy. Guess what? They're going to experience the same brutal death. Think of it as a noose around your neck. Slow, painful. You'll lose your friends, your family, your job, everything that you hold dear, all from bearing that one object with the elements of death in that grave. So it really has nothing to do with a time or date or a location. You can easily go into the wooded area, say going out on the trails, someplace where it won't be disturbed, like say a rotted tree, for an example. And you can bury that same jar right there next to that tree, and it will do the exact same thing. Thoroughness doesn't really affect it. I mean, you can go overboard, but you don't want to make it an obsession because, like the example with Hecate, it will come back on you, especially if you start feeling guilt or regret. Heptameron, that's actually a very good size grimoire in itself. It goes with the Salamantic path working. Yeah, that it is, Mother Eldridge. That it is. I've actually used them a few times myself over 31 years. And I can tell you that I've seen curses work in weird ways. I had somebody that I took underneath my wing as an adoptive daughter, and she caught me on a bad, bad, bad day. Tried to bring me into an argument, and I just wrote out the Lucifer's curse on there, and the guy thought that I had cursed him, and he was dead by morning. And that was just by writing it out. Okay. I've done the 3 nights of hell curse, watched my and placed it right in my own job, my former job. That place went from a $7 billion company, and that's just the main branch in the region, to making only thousands. Can't even keep employees. They're running on a skeleton crew. Hell, my current job is experiencing the same issues because they choose to violate the legal Mirandi code, penal codes. They choose to anyone on, say, for an example, SSDI or SSI, they're overlooking for team lead or above because they would rather have somebody else. You get sexism in the way as well. And the fact that they're in a very large pentagram, guess what? The boss had a heart attack, triple bypass, hasn't been the same since. They haven't been able to keep employees for more than a few weeks, if not a couple of months. Yeah, I've seen curses do a lot of weird things. And this is more of a slow, painful death. I've used cursing jars in different locations just to experiment on what would happen. I've seen where people have lost their job, their friends. I did one curse where this guy literally couldn't even be with his girlfriend, couldn't be around another person because couldn't even get it up. Okay. And it's interesting because these things work at different intervals. Different intervals. Okay. A cursing jar in a cemetery, for an example, is a slow strangulation. It's literally taking something that would be like this and dragging it out, making the target or the victim suffer excruciatingly painful death. Like I said, losing everything one by one, knowing that you can't do anything about it, it's worth giving that only to your worst enemies. Your worst enemies. Putting it in another location, like, say, an abandoned church, putting it up in a concrete wall, or perhaps hidden out in the woods. Toss it in a river where it would sink. Same exact thing. You can even do a debunk box. Okay? Same exact thing. You can create it and put everything right in it and make that victim suffer. But it comes down to your intent either way. Your will and your intent and the energy that you're putting out. Mirror boxes are easily broken. I don't recommend them and I don't use them. And that is for that very same purpose. They break too easily. You do a wooden box, it rots over time. If you use a glass box, a mirror box, depending on the outlying frame, it comes down to just that. What are you using the mirror box in? Okay, are you putting the mirrors inside of a wooden box, a metal box? If you're using a metal box, well, guess what? You're not going to get very far with that, especially if it's cast iron, like, say, one of the old safe boxes. Okay, you look at the old metal safes, steel safes. Explosives can't even get in them. Okay, because they're so thick. You think the ground is going to, corrode them? No. If you take a wooden box, you put the glass in it, and you set it up as a mirror box, and yeah, it will rot over time. But it comes down: are you going to be there by the time that's done, rotting in the ground? Are you going to be there when that mirrored box decides to kick in and eliminate your enemy. The two curses that I mentioned earlier was the Lucifer's Touch and the Three Nights of Hell curse. Those two you can find in a single PDF. Just Google them and you can get the PDF right off Google for free. Very interesting curses, I might add. So very easy. You can chant it. You can just say it like 3 times, whatever, and just put it out there. It comes down to you. But personally, if you're going to do a curse, a hex, I would recommend the Devil's Hours between midnight and 3 a.m. It is when your victim or your target is in what is known as the Z state of slumber, completely and utterly helpless. Unless you're doing a canning jar spell where you're burying either the box or the ashes, the remnants of it, into the ground. After that, just walk away and don't look back. Don't even think about it. Don't even return to it. Forget about it. Let it do its thing. A lot of practitioners and a lot of these individuals who get into wanting to have a curse done, I can't tell you how many of these people keep pushing and pushing and pushing. They want it. It's like, what's that latest thing on TV these days? Oh, right, the easy button. The easy button. They want it now. They don't want to wait for it. They want it to happen now. Like you just put the curse together, you put it in the ground, they expect the person to be dead just like that. No, it don't work like that. You got to remember that any kind of curse takes time, especially after you've flung it. When you flung a curse, savor every moment of it. Savor every moment. And this is why. If you just walked up to somebody and you pull the trigger on a Glock, you shoot them in the head, they're dead. Where's the benefit from that? Where's the self gratification of their suffering, their torment for all the trouble that they've caused and done? You take, for an example, I'm going to give you some prime examples here. You take these officers, the ones that killed George Floyd, created a huge amount of ripples throughout North America. Okay, I'm talking riots, looting, criminal activities. Even the Black Lives Matter movement. Okay, and it came down to this trial where each of these 3 men, these 3 officers who have had 10 years, 20 years, 25 years worth of experience should have known better. But some of them even have, these 3 men have numerous accounts against them. And yet they were swept underneath the rug. Here, you have a judge keeping them in prison and bringing them back at least once a month for an update on their trial, upon their sentencing. And they're waiting. So it's probably going to be about next year before they even get to their sentencing, because they want to interview each member of the jury. Each member of the jury. So right here, this is a great example of self-gratification, savoring that victory. These men are being charged. They're being held without bail. They're suffering in prison, knowing that a lot of those individuals in there, either in the jail itself or in the prison they have locked up. They have arrested and put in prison. Cops like this, they don't last long, okay? They'll get what's coming to them one way or the other. But in the meantime, watch them squirm. Watch them suffer as George Floyd suffered underneath that knee in full restraint, suffocating to death. Another example would be the US government going to Waco, a culture that didn't want anything to do with the US government. They went in there, a fire broke out, and a lot of people lost their lives. Did anybody do anything about that? No. No justice was served. They did a small little minor investigation and swept it underneath the rug. Two examples there. You see the quick and the long lasting. You look at 9/11, prime example right there. Here we are, what, about 20 years later, and we're still over there, kicking ass and taking names. How many presidents says it's time to pull out, but they never do? You see the point. That's a curse. Have a good night.